Welcome back. So today I thought we'll talk about how we can uh, use brushes inside ZBrush. So there are a couple ways we can do this. The most common way is to use the keyboard shortcut, and that's B on the keyboard. So B will bring up your brush palette, like you see here, and there's a whole heap of brushes to choose from. Now, this isn't all the brushes that come with ZBrush. There's actually quite a few that are hidden in the lightbox, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But there's a lot here that we have to choose from. You really would only use a small handful of these depending on what you're doing. And so what I would recommend is just to jot down some of these main ones that we'll probably be using often, and just remember the sort of hotkeys for that. So the hotkeys for these brushes, it's usually three sort of keys. So there's B for brush, and let's say we want to use our standard brush, which is a pretty standard brush to use. That's S on the keyboard, and you can see now all the S keys or all the S brushes are soloed out. Whoops. And now this orange key appears. This is the third key that you have to press to get that brush that you're looking for. So if I'm looking for the standard brush, I can see over here it's the orange key is highlighted T. So that's BST. A lot of these brushes have this sort of logic to them where if you sort of sound it out or slowly sound it out, these letters are quite prominent when you say the name. So brush standard, ST, standard, so BST. Another common one that we'll be using a lot is the move brush. So that's brush, M, and if you figured out the logic already, it is the third key is V. So we can see that here. So B, move, BMV. So that's another one. Another one that we'll be using a lot is your standard or your damn standard brush, which is like our cutting brush. So it's B, D for damn, and standard, so S, so in this case, BDS. Right, so we're using the standard brush, the move brush, the damn standard. The clay build-up brush is something that we'll be using a lot as well. That's great for building up form on organic sort of creatures like we have here. So that one is your form building brush. So that's B, clay, C for clay, and B for build up. So BCB. You can see we can sort of start sculpting here. There are a whole heap of other brushes that we'll be using as well, depending on the type of project we're working on. So if we're going to be doing some more hard surface brushes or hard surface objects, we'll be using the high polish a lot. So that's BHP. That's a great polishing brush, as the name suggests. So it's great for having nice, smooth, flat edges, like what I can do here, for like some nice hard surface sort of shapes that you'll typically sort of see. Another one that we'll be using as well is your trim dynamic. That's a very commonly used hard surface brush. So it's B, T, and I would say it is D, which is over here. So B trim dynamic. So there's a weird logic to how we can sort of quickly select these brushes that we're working with. And it does sound like there's a lot, it's more convoluted than it needs to be, but you do get really, really quick at selecting these brushes. So if I want to quickly go to my move brush, I can just do it like that. If I want to go to my standard brush, that's BST, If I want to go to my damn standard brush, that's BDS, and you can get really, really quick at selecting these brushes, which is quite cool. Just like that, I went to my clay build up and I can go back to my high polish, which is BHP, and just quickly swap over from there. Now, when you're picking these brushes, you'll probably notice as well that your sort of recent ones sort of sit up the top here that you've been using, so you can sort of quickly access them here. Another thing as well is that you'll notice that I have this custom UI, and these are sort of brushes that I use a lot, but I kind of don't remember the hotkey all too much, or it just takes a bit of time to sort of use them. Well, it's something that I can easily just press, right? So for like the select react tool, this is great for just selecting things. But we can add brushes and things to this menu, and I'll talk about that in another video because this is all about brushes. But just note that you can add buttons or custom buttons to the panels here. Now, if I go to my clay build-up brush, we can adjust the intensity of this brush going up to the top toolbar here. So you can see that we have this slider called Z intensity. Now, this is the intensity of the brush. So if I bring this all the way up to the right, they'll be maxing that brush out. If I bring it all the way to the left, it is at the most minimal sort of strength here. And I'm really pressing hard on my Wacom tablet to bring out this feature. All right. You can see that if I hover over this slider, the hotkey for that is U. So if I press U on my keyboard and slide this up and down, it does the same thing. Right. To adjust the draw size, it's just this slider over here. You can see that the hotkey for that is S. So right will make that bigger. On the left, it will make that smaller. Right. And S is the hotkey for that. Okay, so the focal shift here is the sort of fall off of the brush. So if I go to, let's say the back here, just sculpt something like this. If I adjust that fall off so it's all the way to the right, you can see that we have a very, very soft brush. It's kind of like adjusting the hardness of the brush, like you would in sort of Photoshop or something like that. Right. So I bring that all the way to the right, be very hard so the edges be almost exactly, pretty much exactly to what the alpha you're using, right? So I can adjust the sort of hardness and softness of the brush just by messing with this slider. And you can see here, O is the hotkey for that. So there was B is to bring out your brush palette. Just to recap this, you generally use a 3-button combo to select the brush that you're looking for. So BCB for clay buildup, BST for the standard brush, and so on. So you do have to sort of remember the combo that you're wanting to, whatever brush that you're trying to pick. If it's too hard to remember, watch out for the next video because there will be a video how to make this sort of custom UI, which can make it a little bit easier. Now, there are other brushes, so there's quite a lot here, but there's actually quite a number more default brushes that come with ZBrush, and they sit within the lightbox. So you can see over here, if I go over to the brush tab in my lightbox, so that's this button here in the toolbar, or I can press the comma key to bring that up. There's a whole heap of brushes here that aren't listed in this brush palette section. And quite a lot of these are very, very useful. So for example, you would have in your smooth folder, there's a brush called Smooth Stronger, which is like smooth, but much, much stronger. And then there's a smooth groups, which is very important for really making polygroups very clear as to what, what side is what color and so on. Then over here, there's in your trim folder, we have our trim smooth borders. We have our trim holes. So this is a great one for adding sort of holes into our mesh. It's a pretty aggressive brush, but you can see it could add a sort of sci-fi element to some sort of hard surface sort of asset. And if we adjust that focal shift, we can get something a bit more harder. You can see it's quite a useful brush for adding this sort of feature, but you can only really get to that through the lightbox. So there's quite a lot here that's very useful that is not in the brush palette by default. There's a bunch of different polish brushes and so on. So take a look at this. It's packed full of brushes that you'll never see. Oh, another one that we'll use a lot is this clay choose brush. Maybe not this one. Oh, you could use this one. No, actually, I think we do have it in the. Yeah, no, it's in here. Sorry. But nevertheless, there is quite a lot of brushes here that we would not use if we don't know they were there, basically, because they're not in this list. And if you add any custom brushes, they will appear here. So you can see I have a whole folder here that I've made just for all my custom brushes that I've collected, which is not many, but I've just got a few custom brushes in there. Okay, so that's how we can select brushes. Just another thing to note as well in your side panel, if I just take this out, if you don't have brushes here docked to the left, you can just open up this palette and then dock that back over. And here we have a whole bunch of settings, previously used brushes, and other things like modifiers and things like that that are that adjust the current brush that you're using. So for example, if I use something like the primitive brush, the IIM brush, which that is telling me it's not liking the multiple subdivision levels. But let's say I grab something like this, which is just adding a primitive to this shape here. Let's say for that, I can go into the modifier tab or the panel palette of this brush and make some adjustments. Let's say we want the the projection strength. Let's increase that. That can change the sort of the way this brush operates, right? Where the model is getting projected onto this shape here. Well, in this case, not very well, but you can see that it's making some adjustments there. Likewise, we can go into things like the auto masking, which we'll be using the backface masking a lot, and other things like the depth mask as well. So this is very handy for sort of constraining your brush's surface, or where it's sort of what surface it sort of affects. But I'll suggest that you just have a big play with all the different brushes. I think that's the best way to understand how the brushes sort of work. It's just to use them and then mess around with them. One thing I forgot to say as well is when we're working with brushes, let's say if I use my clay builder over here as well, there are always two ways we can use the brush. So there's the normal way, which is what you're seeing now. But then there's the alt method. which is holding down Alt. And that usually does an alternative mode. In this case, it is sculpting inwards, right? So this is a very handy feature for, just sculpting inwards of something. So you can do that. Or if you're doing like a masking, so I'm just holding down Control in the open space here, and then just grabbing a mask. If I hold down Alt, I can minus from that mask. Or if I hold down Shift, whoops. If I just drag a little box over it, it adds to the mask. But if I hold down Alt, it minuses from that. So Alt is doing the alternative of the default function. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so just have a play around with the different brushes. I think that's really important when it comes to learning the brushes. Don't forget that you do have a bunch of different brushes in your Lightbox under the brush tab. That's not in the default brush palette that pops up when you press B.